Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 78 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on 5 ways to keep your brain healthy and reduce your risk of dementia. So this is a great episode because I actually found it so much fun to actually write about it and actually give these tips, because we've been having a few crises. I don't know how you would say it, recently, because someone in our family has a dementia and they're really beginning to deteriorate. So we're really trying to support his wife, and yeah, it's really, really messy at the moment. So I really don't want any of you to go through this. So I really hope that today's episode can benefit you, your family, and if you're a clinical psychologist, then hopefully this can help benefit your clients or other people that you know. So moving on to the psychology news section. So we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. So the first one is, our brains see beams of motion from people's faces towards the object of their attention. Back in the 1970s, the developmental psychologist Piaget discovered that if you ask young children to explain the mechanics of vision as they understand them, the answer tends to reveal the exact same misconception, that our eyes admit some sort of immaterial substance into the environment and captures the sight of the objects much like a projector. Now this is what the ancient Greeks believe, actually going slightly off a top. Oh, and it's actually going to go onto that bit. I'll just be quiet and continue with the article. So, although this belief declines with age, it is still surprisingly prevalent in adults. What's more, so-called X-transmission theories of vision have a long-running history dating all the way back to antiquity. The Greek philosopher Empedocles was among the first to suggest in the 5th century BC that our ability to see must stem from an invisible fire beam sending out of our eyes to interact with our surroundings. This theory was subsequently endorsed by intellectual authorities like Polemo and Galen. No idea if I've said that right, I do apologise. Now, a duo of researchers behind a recent publication in PANS, because I just tried to say that, but it sounded like a rude word, think they may have found an explanation for the intuitive appeal of X-transmission theories. According to the paper, this worldview might just be a reflection of the mechanics that play out within our brains when we follow other people's gazes and track where they pay attention. This is because to carry out this process, our brains actually produce illusionary beams of emotion from another's face, a quirk of evolution with interesting consequences. So I definitely understand this, and it is quite interesting, to be honest, because it's good that it helps to explain why children believe this, and even some adults, because this is, yes, but even though this is completely wrong, but it's still interesting to have a good explanation for this. So moving on to a more applicable one. During lockdown, meaningful activity is more fulfilling than simply staying busy, because let's face it, we're all trying to keep busy at the moment, especially here in lockdown 3, which thankfully the end does seem in sight. So it's not hard to find ways to stay busy during a lockdown. Yes, many of us are spending lots of time at home and have evenings and weekends free from almost any kind of social activity. Isn't that the truth? But we're also juggling work, chores, childcare, life admin, and the various emotional demands of living through a global pandemic. For some, indeed, staying busy has been an appealing prospect. Indeed, hundreds of articles have been written with ideas about how to stay busy and distracted during the boredom of the lockdown. But a new study suggests that meaningful activity than simply busyness might be the way to stay emotionally stable during this period. So this I definitely agree with, because it's actually one of the things we're going to be talking about today, and something that I've mentioned quite a lot of times on this podcast, because it's all about having a purpose. Making yourself feel like what you're doing is important. So I really understand this, and I really encourage you to try and find some sort of meaningful work. Yes, or some sort of meaningful activity. For example, spending time with your children, but actually, I don't know, maybe creating memories with them. Don't know how. I'm a bit young to have kids, so I really just don't know. I'm just putting the idea out there. Okay, so we will do one more. So, with the editors, what are the psychological effects of losing your religion? For many, their religion is a core part of their identity, the meaning they find in life, and their social world. It seems likely that changing this crucial aspect of themselves will have significant psychological consequences. A devout person would probably predict that these will be unwelcome, increased emotional distress, isolation, and waywardness. A firm atheist, on the other hand, might seem the potential positives. Perhaps the decoder will now grow in open-mindedness and thrive thanks to the newfound free thinking and spiritual freedom. A study which focuses on Protestant Christians paints a complex picture. At least for this group, there is no single pattern of changes associated with losing or changing one's religious faith, and the predictions of both the devout and the atheist are to some extent accurate. So this, I think, is quite important because I'm not a religion, as this paper says. I'm a firm atheist, but I completely respect if you or any of your family and friends have like religious beliefs, and I think it's quite important because, as this article says, for like religious people though, it is a massive part of their self and their self-esteem, and it's part of their identity. So if you take that away from them, then this can have really negative psychological consequences. This is why it's important to research it, just so we know how to help these people like just they don't suffer from mental health difficulties. So that's enough the psychology news section. Let's move on to the personal update. So, moving on to the personal update. So, this week I'm really excited because it's been definitely one of the more interesting weeks in my life. Because, for starters, we didn't have internet for 2 days, which was interesting because I had some massive projects that I wanted to like do, and they all like needed the internet, so that was quite interesting. But thankfully, we were managed to work around that. That was definitely quite interesting, though. I'm still continuing researching with the new 2 forensic psychology books. I've finished one type of profiling, like researching that, which is the FBI style, which is I can understand why people criticize it. I'm going to be nice and diplomatic like that. It's very interesting, and it makes me understand why some people think psychology is absolute rubbish. Well, rubbish though, because especially the FBI style of profiling is all that some people seem to think psychology is, and of course, and that's just really bad. So and actually, just because I've said that, I think I might mention that in the book though, or maybe in the introduction when I start writing it. So I did start to research what's known as statistical and geographical profiling, which is a lot more interesting and just a lot more scientific. So I'm really enjoying that, and it is quite interesting though. But I've just started the chapter, so I'm pretty sure that the research will show that it's another questionable one, but it is interesting though. Yeah, but like jumping back to the no internet situation, and that was actually quite funny because, because I was actually doing 2 things on the Tuesday, which is when it was out pretty much all day until late evening. So I had a placement interview for my psychology placement, which I'm going on next year, and then I'll do my final year at university. In the year after, and thankfully I got that placement. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be working with a team of university researchers looking at something to do with depression. Yeah, but one of the projects is the psychology of the positive and negative effects of sad music on depression, which I think sounds really interesting. But the bad thing about academia and any academic subjects is it turns out that as part of the application, I needed to do a brief literature review, and then what happened was that person who's in charge of this sent me the titles of the paper, and I thought they sounded so long and so dull. But then when I got to the interview, they explained what the research projects were actually going to be about, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I can't wait to jump into these research projects, but it's just the titles in the psychology I think are awful and also quite hilarious because they're just so dull. But something I'm really interested in this week though is that I launched a new Kickstarter campaign for my fiction brand, and if you're on my psychology email list where you get your free and exclusive 8 psychology book box set, then you would have got an email about this last night, because I sent you some of the recent episodes, and I also explained to the Kickstarter. So the reason why I'm mentioning a fantasy Kickstarter on a psychology podcast, and of course, feel free to skip this section on your podcast app, like maybe click at the next 30 seconds. But the reason why I'm mentioning this though is that because I'm actually going to do you all a special deal though, because the Kickstarter is to raise money for a fantasy audiobook. A fancy audiobook. Like we're almost like 40% funded. Like as I talk about this, which after the first few days is brilliant though. But I would love for all of you to be part of this great project. So what I'm doing is that if you back the project at the $5 ebook level for Winter's Ascension, which is the ebook copy, or if you back it at the £12 paperback level or the £20 hardback level, I will give you a psychology book equivalent. Like for example, like let's say that you back the £5 ebook level, then when the campaign's ended, you can email me saying like, "Hi Connor, I'm back with your latest Kickstarter campaign. Can I please have your forensic psychology book?" That is absolutely fine, and then I will give you that forensic psychology ebook. But I want to say though, when it comes to the shipping of the paperback and hardbacks, I'm only shipping to people in the UK, Australia, and America, and the US. Sorry everyone else, but it's just the logistics and the costs in those. So I'd be really grateful if you want to be a part of this project. And I do recommend it if you're interested in developmental psychology, because I'm also going to do the current new psychology books that are on a pre-order, meaning that I can get them basically a month or a good few weeks before they're actually released. And if you're interested in developmental psychology, I do recommend it back in the Kickstarter, because I think I priced the developmental psychology ebook for about $6.99 or about $5.99, meaning that if you back the £5 level, you will most probably get it a bit cheaper due to the exchange rate. So if you're interested in backing that, then the link is in the podcast description on your podcast app, or the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. Then you just find today's episode. And as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, or you can tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. And the more official sponsor for today's episode is a Biological Psychology 3rd edition, which is one of the pre-order books that you could get on the Kickstarter. The reason why I really enjoy this biological psychology book is, let's face it, biological psychology is not one of the most exciting areas of psychology, because it's really dry. It's really dry and is quite repetitive, especially when it comes down to the nervous system and how the brain works. But this book explains lots about biological psychology in a really easy to understand way that's really engaging, including sleep and some of the other mechanisms that we're actually going to talk about in today's episode. So I really, really, really recommend Biological Psychology 3rd edition. Available in ebook in all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback, hardback, and larger print version from Amazon or your local library. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be looking at 5 ways to keep your brain healthy and reduce the risk of you getting dementia. So as I've already said in the psychology news section, this is a really important episode to me, because I really don't want you, your friends, your family, or basically anyone I know to get dementia, because it's an awful condition, and it just does quite a lot of damage to the person and their social support network. So hopefully will help you in the long term. And also in today's episode I tried to find some that were cognitive based, some that were physical health based. Then I also picked a few diet based ones, which are actually quite interesting. So hopefully there's a wide range of things for you to enjoy here. So the first one is, get your flu vaccination. If you remember a few episodes ago, back in January, I always encourage you to get vaccinated, whether it's against flu, COVID, or the MMR, or any other condition. And surprisingly enough, becoming vaccinated against the flu can actually protect you against Alzheimer's disease, which is a type of dementia. And I did just want to say that if you want to look at the references for any of these, then please go to connorwiley.net/podcast to find today's episode, and they're all at the bottom. There's even a few extra references for the other ones that I didn't mention. And again, your flu vaccination to protect you against Alzheimer's isn't just me saying this, because a large psychology study studied a large data set of 9,066 people, and they found that people who got a flu vaccination had a decreased risk of cognitive decline. And of course, this is associated with dementia and its various types. And the researchers in the paper actually said, open quote, people that consistently got the annual flu shot had lower risk of Alzheimer's. This has translated to an almost 6% reduction of Alzheimer's disease for patients between the ages of 75 to 84 for 16 years. So that, I think, is really good, because I'm sure that some people think really just 6%, but that's still a massive reduction, and that could hopefully protect you. So if you're offered the flu vaccine, then you might just want to take it. And I also quite like it because it shows that by protecting our physical health, we're also protecting our mental health too. And this is also reasonably easy to do, though, especially in countries with free healthcare. So another one is be positive. So I've said this, I've said this on the podcast before, and if you go to connorwiley.net/clinical-psychology, then you can find all the other clinical psychology episodes, because I'm bound to have mentioned this before. So, but being positive is, being a positive, cheerful person is always really good for you, and it's always great though for your mental health though. And thankfully, being a positive or positivism isn't an innate trait, so you can learn it and you can change, even if you're not that right now. And also in the blog post, I just mentioned that I would just say that if you want to become more positive, just start with the little things, appreciate the little things, like thanking your loved ones, and also you might find it useful, to write about something positive each day. The next one is get a good night's sleep. So yes, I talk about this a lot more in biological psychology, and I've got quite a few chapters dedicated to sleep though. But we all know that we have to get enough sleep, because if we don't, then there are a lot of physical and psychological difficulties that can develop. Whilst researchers are still trying to determine the relationship between dementia and sleep, some research clearly shows that the brain gets rid of a lot of its harmful waste during sleep that is associated with Alzheimer's disease, meaning that if you get more sleep, you're more likely to get rid of this harmful. Basically, try and get enough sleep, which of course, after reading this, I'm definitely going to try to. Not that I have bad sleep anyway, but again, though, you just want to be careful. So another interesting one is that if we move on to more diet-based ways, though, the next one is add berries, apples and green tea to your diet. And yes, I know some of you are thinking, really, green tea? Ugh, that's disgusting. I used to agree with you. I still slightly do. Anyway, though, so research has shown that people who eat foods high in, I'm really sorry, this is a really scientific name, I think it's pronounced flavonoids, substances that reduce inflammation, and these types of foods are associated with a reduction in dementia. So by eating berries, apples, and drinking a green tea, these can all be protective factors to keep your brain healthy. And dark chocolate is high in these flavonoids too. So if you want to eat a bit of chocolate and hopefully reduce your risk of getting dementia, then you can always try a bit of dark chocolate. Okay, so I'm actually quite grateful with this fact, because basically as soon as I wrote this blog post, I actually went downstairs and I had a bowl of berries and some Greek yogurt, and also sometimes I do drink some green tea. But if you don't like green tea, then the final one is you can drink coffee, which I'm more than happy with. In fact, I've even got a cup of coffee here. So according to some research, drinking a coffee actually has a dementia reducing effect, in addition to its increase in short-term concentration. And a longitudinal study studied 1,409 people, and it was found that people who drank moderate amounts of coffee, so 3 to 5 cups a day in midlife, reduced the risk of Alzheimer's disease later in their life. And I tend to drink a maximum of 3 cups of coffee a day. So even though I'm not in midlife, I'm still quite pleased about that. But I do just want to mention, I know there's quite a few research though, of like saying the damaging effects of a coffee, and I remember reading a study 2 years ago linking drinking over 4 cups of a coffee a day, with an increase in mortality later in their life. So it was a few years ago. I don't have a reference for it, but whilst we're on the topic of the health of like being healthy, I just thought I would like give you a caveat. But I would just say this: maybe just limit yourself to like 3 cups of like coffee a day. Of course, this is not official advice, but I would just say drink it in like moderation, like everything. Everything is good for you in moderation. At least that's how I see it then. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode of the podcast. And if you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please tell them about it. And please help us spread the word about the podcast. And also, please check out Biological Psychology 3rd edition to be released in April. And also, please consider checking out my Kickstarter. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.